Comic books in 1969. It's the end of the Silver Age. There's a real slowdown in terms of creativity from the major companies. But we're going to see a big rise in underground comics, kind of the beginnings of independent comics as we now know them. Let's take a look at everything from the CGC Census in 1969 up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. And before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe. Check out the description of this video for links to my Whatnot eBay store, Instagram, and email. So we do this every week. We've been doing it for, 35 weeks now? 36 weeks? Where we take CGCdata.com. We take the top blue label comic books on the CGC Census. We count down from 10 to 1. And then we take a look at the top 10 books from Marvel and DC, as well as the top books from independent publishers, other important books from that year. Now, 1969 is kind of interesting. Silver Age really ending. The Bronze Age begins in 1970. And some of the creativity, obviously, the creation of DC's Silver Age in the late 50s and Marvel's in the early 60s. And then even in the mid-60s, we saw different writers coming in and working on these titles other than Stan Lee from Marvel. And but 1969 is pretty slow in mainstream comics. We will be talking about a lot of independent underground comics, but I'm going to have to take some extra special time making sure that I edit the covers, because they are meant for adults, and there's also some other independent publishers that are making the list fairly high. And I think what we'll see is a lot of the books that are high on the list are based on cover art or movie speculation. So let's just jump right into it as we go into the top 10. Coming in at number 10 on the list is Amazing Spider-Man, number 73. Stan Lee, story John Romita, cover John Buscema and Jim Mooney did the art. This is the first appearance of not only Silvermane, but also we see her on the cover of Man Mountain Marco. Not one of Spider-Man's more enduring villains, but it is an Amazing Spider-Man, two-digit Amazing Spider-Man that is still very valued by collectors. Now, this is kind of interesting. This is the number 10 book on the list from CGCdata.com. The census count for this book is the lowest for a book in 10th place since 1962. Now, you figure by 1969, as we go year by year, the books are going to be collected more, saved in higher condition. But you compare this to other books that reached the 10 list that had at least minor first appearances or semi-major first appearances, not Man Mountain Marco. This has a census count. Well, by comparison, the 1968 10th place book was FF Annual 6 with Franklin Richards and Annihilus. That had 3,014. And for 1967, it was Avengers 47, which was the first appearance of Dane Whitman. That had 2006. This has a total of 1,425 copies on the census, and that made it number 10. Let's look at number 9, and this is a movie, a cover by. This is Marvel Superheroes number 20. This is all about the Doctor Doom cover. Larry Lieber and Frank Giacoia did the art. Another one of these covers from this era from Marvel Comics where the main character has their feet very far apart. You look at Iron Man 1, Submariner 1, and I think Captain Marvel 1. This is another one where the feet are far apart. Doctor Doom's story, this is his first, featured solo story. Its first appearance of Valeria. This has a census count of 1,492. Number 8 on the list. Another cover by Captain America 110. Cover and story and art by Jim Steranko. As first appearance of Madame Hydra, who later becomes Viper, not as big. It's all about this cover. And Steranko's most of his output is over the course of about 3 years here in the late 60s, early 70s, 4 years. We're talking about he still does a lot of signings, but like the main books that you collect from Jim Steranko are in this late 1960s period. Again, this is a cover by, and it has a census count of 1,781. Number 7 on the list is a little bit of a combination. Coming in at number 7 on the list, and this is sort of a combination of first appearance / cover by. This is X-Men number 58 with a Roy Thomas story. We talked about in the last couple of episodes how Roy Thomas really kind of took the baton from Stan Lee and really, especially with Avengers and X-Men, created a lot of new characters. Changed the titles quite a bit. Neil Adams did the cover, and with Tom Palmer did the art, and this is a cover by, but it's also the first appearance of Havoc in costume. He did appear previously as the brother of Cyclops, but this amazing Neil Adams cover really sets a tone. I think it kind of is emblematic of the era. We talk about, kind of late 60s. This definitely has a 1969 vibe to it, but it is an awesome Neil Adams cover. And it has a census count of 1,901. Number 6 on the list is very much a movie-related issue. This is Marvel Superheroes number 18. This is the first appearance of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Story by Arnold Drake and art by Gene Cole and Mike Esposito. Did the cover as well. 2 issues earlier than the Doctor Doom book. There were... this was an anthology title. At this point, they were the square-bound books. Right? 25 cents. They were doing, I think, one new story and then reprints. Some Golden Age, some Silver Age. Origin and first appearance of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But these are not the Guardians of the Galaxy that we're largely familiar with from the movies. It's Major Vance Andrew, Charlie 27, Martin X. And you'll see there all the way on the right, doesn't look much like his movie depiction or how he would shortly be depicted, is Yandu Undanta. Of course, played by Michael Rooker in the Guardians of the Galaxy films, a much different color scheme. But it's just Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn movies made that into such a household name that people started seeking this book out. I'm sure the census count increased much more, in proportion compared to other keys of this era after the movies came out. Census count of 2,207. Another one with a little bit of movie spec is Amazing Spider-Man number 78. Lee and Buscema and Jim Mooney did the art. John Romita did the cover. This is the origin and first appearance of the Prowler. Hubie Brown, who of course has been connected to Miles Morales, was played by Donald Glover, played the Prowler in the Spider-Man Homecoming. And that has propelled this book to be the top ASM book of the year, right? ASM, as we've said, are always going to be highly collectible. 2,212 copies on the census. At number 4, another cover pick. This is Captain America 109 with a Stan Lee story and Jack Kirby cover. Origin of Captain America Retold, but I think just this classic newspaper. It's also harder to get in high grade because that white background yellows very easily for a book of this vintage. Just a classic Cap story, and it has a census count of 2,324. At number 3 on the list, movie spec as well, I think, on this one has driven this one. This is Thor 165, Stan Lee story, Jack Kirby and Vinnie Coletta cover and art, and this is the first full appearance of him. He had that origin story with the Cocoon in Fantastic Four 66 and 67. Here he is with a really cool Jack Kirby cover, a little bit muted by the Vinnie Coletta inks. But this was a character, even before the casting was announced of Will Poulter would be playing him in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. This is one of those characters that during the boom, people were speculating on Marvel characters, Silver Surfer, Ghost Rider, Adam Warlock, who had not yet appeared in an MCU film. So that helped drive this book, and then the casting drove the book even harder, and then people were getting it graded. has a census count of 3,646. Another book that is a really good first appearance, has been driven to some degree by the movies, is Captain America 117. This is the first appearance of Sam Wilson as the Falcon. Stan Lee story, Gene Colan cover and art. A different costume for him than he would be better known as, with the red and white costume, but this kind of hideous green and orange thing. I don't know what they were thinking with the color scheme, but this was a book that really got hot right around Endgame as Sam was taking over the mantle of Captain America, but again, it hasn't really held, but people were grading it, and it is one of the major first appearances of 1969, and it has a total census count of 3,861. Number 1 on the list. This is a total cover by Silver Surfer number 4, this classic cover by John Buscema. Stan Lee wrote the story, and it's just a classic cover, right? Much homaged, much sought after in collections. This is just a great cover. But here's the interesting thing. The total number of copies on the census is the lowest for an issue in the top spot since 1965. So again, 1969, kind of a muted year in terms of the interesting thing. I think 1970 is going to change that as we have those early Bronze Age keys. And it's going to kind of see that ebb and flow. We might have a little bit of a slowdown, I'm going to guess, in the late 70s. But I never look ahead as to what the top books on the census are. So, I always kind of, when I finish editing this and have it uploaded to YouTube, I'm like, okay, let me take a look at the following year. So I have my suspicions about 1970, but I am not entirely sure. Let me know what you think in the comments below without looking it up. Best 1970 book. Anyway, this particular book, and again, Silver Surfer, only 18 issues, very collectible, total census count of 5,222. Let's go outside the top 10 to some other keys. Number 14 on the list, we're going to stay with Marvel. They dominated the top 10. Number 14 is another X-Men book with another great Neil Adams cover. This is X-Men number 60, and this is the first appearance of Sauron. Roy Thomas wrote the story, and again, Roy Thomas creating another new character. His first appearance here, 1,277. Next, we're going to go to another publisher, and it's not yet DC. We have another publisher that has a book that had more than the top DC book, and this is a really classic first appearance with a classic cover, and it's a top book from Warren. You'll probably guess it's Vampirella number 1. Frank Frazetta cover. It is magazine size, so these are in magazine slabs. Origin and first appearance of Vampirella. Frank Frazetta also did a frontispiece for this. Forrest J. Ackerman's story. Reed Crandall, Neil Adams, and Billy Graham art. Reed Crandall, a classic from the Golden Age with Black Hawk for Quality Comics. But this, again, a classic cover by Frazetta. A character that has endured, has her own series still with many variant covers, and is a character you often see cosplayed at major Comic-Cons. There was a woman dressed as Vampirella. I was there on Family Day. It was not a family-friendly Vampirella. My kids were like, what is that? And my wife is, what are you looking at? At any rate, this book is very sought after by collectors, both collectors of Vampirella, the horror genre in general, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit more as we move through the list, and also Frazetta. 1,096 copies on the census. The next book we're going to take a look at is Avengers 71. Roy Thomas doing a little bit more and setting himself up for a series he would do in the 70s. Sal Buscema and Sam Granger did the cover and art. This is the first appearance of The Invaders, the team that Roy Thomas kind of put together with the Golden Age pieces of Captain America, Submariner, and the Human Torch. Black Knight joins the Avengers in this one. So I know people have been speculating on the Invaders coming to the MCU. I don't know if I really see it. Are they going to introduce an android Human Torch? Who knows? Anyway, we might see something quasi like that, but this particular book has a census count of 1,083. Now let's go to the top DC book. The top DC book is 65th on the list. There are 63 Marvel and one Warren book ahead of it, and it is Justice League of America number 75. Denny O'Neil did the story, and we're going to be talking about Denny O'Neil quite a bit in the next few years. Dick Dillon and Joe Giello did the interior art, and Carmine Infantino and Murphy Anderson did the cover. In this one, it's considered the first appearance of the second Black Canary. But that isn't really what the story was. It was retconned many years later. It was retconned in the early 80s. So, Black Canary, Golden Age hero, appeared in Flash Comics, was one of the members of the Justice Society of America in the last number of issues of All-Star Comics. She was one of the featured characters when they brought the JSA back in a lot of those team-ups. The Black Canary was a popular character to use because she was one of only two female members of the Justice Society along with Wonder Woman, but unlike Wonder Woman, she didn't have an Earth 1 counterpart. So, in the previous issue, which is a JLA JSA team-up, her husband, who was a police detective, Larry Lance, is killed. He sacrifices himself to defeat the villain, Aquarius. She is so distraught, she says, I have to leave Earth 2 and come over to Earth 1. Right? Now, she probably, this is 1969. She probably would have been, like, if you think about the ages of characters, and they did make the Justice Society characters older than the JLA characters, she probably would have been about 40 years old. She was probably very young when she took up the mantle of Black Canary. That was later in the Golden Age, later in the 1940s. So, you know, they just said, okay, she's coming over, and this is the same character. And she was a stalwart of the JLA for many years, the romantic relationship with Green Arrow, et cetera, et cetera. Then later on, they said, you know what? Let's this is pre-crisis. Let's explain this, that it really wasn't her, but her daughter. And who was it? I don't even remember the villain, basically held a daughter in stasis. She was raised like in an alternate dimension or some nonsense like that. I don't even remember the story. I got to read that story again. Remind me. And she, so the original Black Canary traded places with her. So, like, is she, like, in her early 40s or, like, in her 20s or, like, 20-ish? It's unclear. And, you know, like, nobody noticed that there was an enormous age difference in the character. At any rate, this is where she joins the JLA. It's become a little more popular since we consider that the first appearance of the second Black Canary. In retrospect, just 475 copies on the Census. Now, that's for the top DC book. I didn't even look back. The top DC book to have a Census count as low as 475. Oh my, oh my. Where do we have to go back to? I'm going to... 475 for the top DC book. Nope. Nope. Because we did have a lot more going on. I mean, we're talking like minuscule numbers compared to earlier in the Silver Age, to be honest with you. 1961, 1960, 59. And we go into the 50s, we're starting to talk about, I have to go to another. I mean, I am really... Okay, here's what we have to go back to. Not 58. 1957. When Showcase number 8, second Barry Allen, had 310 copies on the Census. It might have more now, since it's been a couple of months since I did that. Several months, right? That's whatever. 12 years that we have to go back that the Census count was that small. So, yeah, the 1969 is really kind of a desert for comic keys. You can still watch the rest of this video. It's interesting, and, you know, we'll be talking about some more comic history other than just Black Canary's continuity. 475 copies on the Census. Next DC book, Witching Hour number 1, kind of ushering in DC's Bronze Age horror, late in the Silver Age. There was the House of Mystery had changed over the previous year. This is a new number 1. Nick Cardy did the cover. We'll see a lot of Cardy covers, a lot of Wrightson. And a lot of cover buys for these, right? Because the stories are anthology stories. They're one-offs. They're often not repeating characters, although there are some. We had a Alex Toth story in art, Neil Adams and Pat Boyette art, and first appearance of Mordred, Mildred, and Cynthia. I think those are the three witches, right? Yeah, the first appearance of three witches. Really cool cover. And again, if you're a Bronze Age horror fan, you have to have this book. 454 copies on the Census. Staying with horror. Showcase number 80, the first Silver Age appearance of the Phantom Stranger. Remember, early 1950s, he had his own 6-issue series with DC. Here we have a Neil Adams cover. Mike Friedrich did the story. Jerry Grandinetti did the art on the interior. It's also the first Silver Age appearance of Dr. 13. But I think the cover really helps this quite a bit. This has a census count of... I just lost it. Census count of 417. We're going to go to another publisher. We're going to go to Wally Wood. Wally Wood's self-published Heroes, Inc. presents Canon. Wally Wood did the cover. Wally Wood and Ron White stories. Wood, Ralph Reese, and Steve Ditko art. 3 features, Dragonella and the Misfits. But this is really Wood, more adult, but I don't think it was as adult as the Underground stuff. It's kind of in between. It's not, and Wood, you know, especially later on in his career, wasn't shy about drawing nude women. That's for sure. But this is more of an independent book, right? Especially an artist-driven one, a creator-driven one. And I think it lasted a second issue, and that was it. The total number of copies on the Census is 370. The next book on the list, not to DC yet, it's Vampirella number 2. We have a Bill Hughes cover. It's the first appearance of Cousin Evilly. So, yeah, Vampirella number 2. Not quite as collectible as number 1. About a third the number of issues. 362 copies on the Census. Let's get back to DC. And again, not anything overly special happening in a lot of these books. We do have a tie for 4th place on the DC list, which is 104th overall. Adventure Comics 381. This is where Supergirl takes over the lead feature in Adventure Comics from the Legion of Superheroes. We do have a Kurt Swan penciled Neil Adams inked cover. That's pretty cool. Carrie Bates did the story. Win Mortimer did the art. You open up, it's getting Win Mortimer art. Anyway, it's first Supergirl solo book. Batgirl has an appearance, and Superman has a cameo, shockingly. And yeah, after 10 years, Supergirl gets her own magazine. There are 316 copies on the Census, which ties it with Detective Comics 387. This is the 30th anniversary of the first appearance of Batman, because if you take 30 times 12 is 360, plus 27 is 387. Because DC Comics, Detective Comics ran monthly precisely over those 30 years. We do have an Irv Novick cover, Mike Friedrich story, and basically it's, you know, you got the Joker and the Penguin hiding here in the background and showing off the covers, you know, with Robin of Detective and Batman, ready for another 30 years, you know. You bet. Well, he'd only be Robin for what, about another 15? Anyway, much like the Adventures, that's a tie, 316 copies on the Census. The next book, and this is, I think, kind of an important book. Sometimes there'll be costume changes. That's, to me, not as important. This is Brave and the Bold number 85. It is a Bob Haney story, and it is a Neil Adams cover and art. Green Arrow dons a new costume. And with Green Arrow, it's more than a costume. It's a great Neil Adams cover. It's more than a change in costume for Green Arrow. It's a total reinvention of the character to be what he would become in the 70s. Listen, when I started reading comics, I got the very end when it was a backup in Flash of the Hard Traveling Hero storyline, you know, with Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams stuff. He was a stalwart in the Justice League of America. He was probably my favorite character in the JLA at the time, because he was a badass. He was a cool character. You know, they really changed him from just being a Batman clone with arrows to being a guy with an edge and a purpose. You know, he was a little bit counterculture. He went against the grain a little bit, and that really worked well for the character. You know, we saw that juxtaposition with Green Lantern. We'll talk about that over the next couple of years, I am sure. But this is, I think, a more important book than just a costume change. This has a census count of 293. Next on the list is Phantom Stranger #1. He got his ongoing series out of that Showcase tryout. This is a Mike Friedrich story. Bill Drought did the cover and art. And this book would last for a number of years. I think, about 60 issues thereabouts? You know, he's remained a pretty popular character in DC's horror/mystical genre. This has a census count of 288. Another Marvel book that I wanted to talk about. This is Tower of Shadows #1. Stan Lee and Jim Steranko stories, Steranko and Buscema art. John Romita did the cover, and there's also Johnny Craig art. I think this is a combination of new stories and reprints. I might be wrong. But this, the Marvel Bronze Age horror. Sometimes the Marvel Bronze Age horror, and I did a video on this previously, they, like DC, they did anthologies, but two things gave DC, I think, the advantage. DC had the better cover artists. Adams, Carty, Wrightson, etc. And DC did mostly new stories, whereas Marvel did mostly reprints. Marvel's Bronze Age horror is better remembered, and we'll talk about this in a few years, for their characters, Dracula, Werewolf by Night, etc. So, at any rate, this particular book has a census count of 286. Back to DC. We still need a few more DCs to round out their top 10. Batman 210, Frank Robbins story, Irv Novick and Joe Giallo art, and then Neil Adams cover. Catwoman dons a new costume. Not one that would last for very long. She had a lot of different costumes in this era. This actually, though, for me, resonates because, you know, for my childhood, this was the costume that the Mego action figure had. And that is pretty cool. Also, I guess, a bondage cover. Interesting that, you know, on the heels of the TV series, they made the costume different than it was on TV. I think maybe one of the animated series, either the late 60s one or the mid 70s one, had Catwoman in this costume, but I'm not positive. I don't remember. At any rate, this Batman 210, 242 copies on the census, helped by a Neil Adams cover. The next book is Batman 213. It's a 30th anniversary special of Batman. It's a giant, which is, I think these are all reprints, which is really weird that, let's see, E. Nelson Bridwell story. So that would have been new. Ross Andrew and Mike Esposito art, and Bill Drought and Vincent Coletta cover. Argent and Robin 30th anniversary issue, giant issue. So the Red Hood story is a reprint. The Game of Death, I'm not sure. The Clayface looks like a reprint from his first appearance. The Argent of Robin, the Argent of Alfred. You see that's Fat Alfred there. So I don't, but since E. Nelson Bridwell did the story, I have a copy of this, but this is not really the kind of book you would expect to be in the top 10 graded books for a particular year, but here's where we are. There wasn't much else going on for DC in 1969. 220 copies on the census. Top book from Gold Key is Star Trek #4. They were coming out fairly infrequently because one was in 67 and two in 68. Now only up to #4 in 69. This is one of the photo covers that features the principals less prominently, but does feature the Enterprise. An alien form invades the Enterprise through Spock's mind. Top book from Gold Key, 212 copies on the census. The 10th DC book is Detective Comics 388, Joker cover, right? Irv Novick did the cover here. John Broome and Frank Robbins stories. Bob Brown, Joe Giello, Gil Kane, and Murphy Anderson art. Batgirl was a backup here, but I think this is all about the Joker cover. And that, again, not much else going on at DC. 206 copies on the census. Another Gold Key book is Yellow Submarine. No number. It's a Beatles one-shot based on the song. This was one of the few songs, if not the only song, written by Ringo Starr. Paul S. Newman, not the actor. Story. Jose Delbo did the art. There is a poster included in this. There was an animated movie, and this is the adaptation of that. Obviously, the Beatles on the front cover. 194 copies on the census. Another Gold Key book, live-action TV series. This is Dark Shadows #1, with a photo cover here of Barnabas Collins, origin first appearance of Barnabas Collins. Dark Shadows, how many issues did that run for? There was also another series later on from, let's see. Dark Shadows ran a total of 35 issues. And then maybe... Oh, there's a Dark Shadows with book 1, book 2, book 3 from Innovation in the early 90s. They were 2 4-issue miniseries and a one-shot. This also has a poster included and 161 copies on the Census. Another DC book to touch upon is House of Mystery number 179. This is Bernie Wrightson's first professional work. Neil Adams did the cover, and we talked about the covers. The Bronze Age horror, a lot driven by the covers, right? Adams, Carty, Wrightson, I think are your top 3. There are other covers that people like, but those are really the ones that draw the most collector interest. 159 copies on the Census. The next book on the list is House of Secrets number 81. Now, House of Secrets had run for 80 issues up through 1966, and then it was canceled. And it was brought back, and it ran for another 9 years up to issue number 154 when DC started essentially Bronze Age horror. We do have a Neil Adams cover. Neil Adams was kind of the cover artist du jour for DC at the time, really before he had the main work on Batman and Green Lantern. Nick Carty would take that over, and then kind of Ernie Chan after that. DC, I mean, because there are a lot of Neil Adams covers from this era on, the Superman family of titles and so on and so forth. Mike Friedman, Jerry Conway did the story, Jerry Grandinetti, Jack Sparling the art. This is where the mystery format begins. It's the first appearance of Abel in title. Abel, one of 2 brothers, he narrated the House of Secrets book, and Cain, his brother, narrated the House of Mysteries book. That's also the origin of the House of Secrets. It's an actual house now. 133 copies on the Census. Our top Archie book is Josie and the Pussycats, number 45. This is where the title changes, and it's the first appearance of the Pussycats band and the first appearance of Valerie Smith. So, Dan DiCarlo cover. Josie had been running for several years as her own title, and then they decided to, in this issue, make a band out of it. And the TV series on which this was based, did it start? It didn't. I think it started in 1970. The TV series premiered in 1970. So the TV series hadn't come out yet, but it ran for a couple of years. Was done by Hanna-Barbera, and it had a very similar look to Scooby-Doo. As a matter of fact, one of the main characters, what's his name? Who was the Alan? He was Josie's love interest. Looked exactly like Fred from Scooby-Doo. Right? It was basically the same character model. But Josie and the Pussycats, this predates the TV series, but I think that has helped it in the popularity of this book in retrospect, because people do fondly remember that TV show. It was from my childhood. And for Saturday morning cartoons, there's a very specific window that you remember, right? When you're old enough to remember and still young enough not to sleep till noon on Saturdays. So Josie and the Pussycats ran for 72 issues. It has a total of 72 copies on the Census. I'm sorry. Up next, I'm not going to really talk about the title of this, because it is a Robert Crumb book. It's a top book from Apex Novelties. It begins with an S. I'm going to have to black out this when I show it on the thing. It is a Robert Crumb book. I'm just going to say 50 copies on the Census. There's not much more I can say without being demonetized. The next book is from Major Magazines. This is Web of Horror number 1. Bernie Wrightson, Michael Kaluta, and Ralph Reese art. And Jeff Jones did the cover. Bernie Wrightson did the frontispiece. The first appearance of Webster. So very early on in writes in his career he did this for Magazine Enterprises. Terror at the Edge of Time, The Skin Eaters. That doesn't sound good. And they are showing a lot of skin there. It's America's Nightmare magazine. This has a total of 46 copies on the census. From San Francisco. This is an underground book. This is Bogeyman. I think it's Bogey, not Boogie. Boogeyman? What do you think? Boogie, I think, would have 2 O's. Bogeyman? I think it's Bogeyman. Number 1, Rory Hayes, cover story and art. Is there anything, Mama help, the Bogeyman is going to get me? It is a little bit violent. It's a little bit crude. It is an underground book. San Francisco was like the capital of underground comics at this point in time. 44 copies on the census. From Russ Gibb Productions, this is Tales from the Ozone, number 1. You can see it has a faux Comics Code stamp on there. Yeah, there is some nudity on the cover. A Crumbo, Betty, Ignatz, and Mr. Tricks. Carl Lundgren, cover and art. Robert Crumb and Vaughn Bowe, Jay Copley, and Gilbert Shelton did the art. So, again, another underground book from this era. And I'm not a big expert in underground comics. And it's very difficult to ascertain when it's not a CGC slab a lot of time between which print it is. This has 43 copies on the census. The next book, we're back to mainstream comics. This is the top book from Dell. This is Valley of the Gwangi. It's a one-shot. It was based on a movie that came out that year where these cowboys go into this valley with dinosaurs. Frank McCarthy cover, Jack Sparling art, the painted cover from the movie poster. Movie classic. I've never seen the movie. 1969 is kind of one of my blind spots. If it was from 1970, I've seen it probably, but not 1969. This has a census count of 40. We go back to the underground. The top from Rip Off Press is Motor City Comics, number 1, a Robert Crumb book. Boingy Baxter, Join the World, Family Revolution or Die, with this woman punching a cop. I don't think there's anything that will get me demonetized on this cover. This has 38 copies on the census. The top book from Printmint is Despair. No number. It's a one-shot. Robert Crumb. See if there's anything good on Why Bother. Yeah, this is really a dynamic cover, but, I'm pretty sure Robert Crumb was depressive. Again, I've said, if you haven't checked out that documentary, it's great. He was a troubled man, but an important figure in the history of comic books, because this kind of gave birth to the idea that comic books could be made outside of, the major publishers, not just Marvel, DC, but Archie, Dell, Harvey, etc., and contain more adult material. It didn't have to be pornographic or, racy to be adult material, but that was what we got. We did have 32 copies in the census. From Charlton, their top book is Flash Gordon number 12. It's the first Charlton book. Reed Crandall cover and art. We talked about him a little early in the episode as being a classic Golden Age artist. At this point in time, the King Features Syndicate IP transferred over to Charlton. They also had Phantom and maybe Mandrake and a couple of other books that became Charlton books at this time. This has 29 copies on the census, which ties with the top book from Harvey, which is Richie Rich number 84, which I pretty much say every year for the top Harvey book. It's on the list for no reason whatsoever. There were a lot of file copies from Harvey, and most of them were graded a while ago. And, a lot of 9.8s. Usually the mean grade on these is ridiculously high. But Richie Rich, number 84, 29 copies on the census. The next book is from Gilberton. And it is Classics Illustrated, number 169, Negro Americans, the Early Years. So Classics Illustrated had stopped coming out with new issues, I think in 1964. But then right at the end, they did a couple of one-offs. And this was the final one. Which were not really adaptations of novels. The previous one, which came out in '69, was Freedom's Cause. That might have been a novel, but this one was just Negro Americans. And we can see from the cover here, we have a lot of prominent figures in African American history. I guess George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington, Harriet Tubman, and featuring stories of the world's greatest authors. But this is a little bit different, and it did garner a total of 22 copies on the census. Next, there's actually a three-way tie. One of them is Terror Tales, number 8. This is the top book from Erie. It is magazine-sized, where this guy, this giant, is eating like these women. Looks like he's eating them alive, because she looks quite distressed. So this is a crazy cover. Terror Tales number 1, 22 copies on the census. It ties it with Conspiracy Capers. This is the top book from The Conspiracy. Skip Williamson cover and art with Jay Lynch art. In this issue, Afro Boy, J. Ogre Hoover, Class War Comics with an X. Very anti-establishment. Conspiracy Capers number 1. Also with 22 copies on the census. And then the last book from Tower Comics, the Wally Wood one, the final issue of Thunder Agents, a special collector's edition, issue number 20. Dynamo Lightning No Man and their most famous action-adventure packed tales of daring. I think that was a reprint, if it's their most adventure action-packed. So this comes in also with 22 copies on the census. The next book is a top book from Kitchen Sink Press. This is by Dennis Kitchen. This is Mom's Homemade Comics. I'm going to have to block out some of this. Nudes, girl smut, weirdos, bold, blustering tales of stark passion featuring the vitriolic, belly-splitting humor of Dennis Kitchen. Kitchen Sink Press actually lasted through the late 90s. Became one of the more influential independent publishers in the 1980s. Especially, they did a lot of more adult material that wasn't too graphic for the most part, but they also did a lot of reprints of classic comic strips, collecting them into hardcovers, including a lot of the reprints of a lot of Will Eisner's Spirit. But Mom's Homemade Comics number 1 here has a total of 20 copies on the census. The next book is the top book from Pirate Press. This is Ghost Mother Comics. The contents of this comic are for adults of all ages. John Mad Peck and S. Clay Wilson art. A sheet from the toilet paper roll of life. I have no idea what this is, but there's 17 copies on the census. The next book is the top book from Bijou Publishing is Bijou Funnies number 3. Jay Lynch story cover and art. Skip Williams, Jay Kinney, Kim Deitch, Roger Brandon, Robert Crumb story and art. First and second printings believed to be indistinguishable. I don't think there's any. Oh well, yeah, maybe. Connie over there isn't. Gotta cover that up. Again, this an underground book. It is a smaller size book, and this is one of the underground books from this era. And there are 14 copies on the census, which ties it with the top book from Promethean Enterprises. Which is Promethean Enterprises number 1. Rick Griffin cover and art. Crumb, Frazetta, Irons, and Inwood art. So this is Frank Frazetta art. It is $1 price tag on this from 1969. It's pretty darned expensive. I'm not exactly sure what's going on this. A guy eating a bunch of eyeball characters. I don't know. It's really weird. I don't really know anything about this. I just know there are 14 copies on the census. Another independent producer is Western Publishing. This is a little tamer. This is the Kite Fun book. with Dastardly and Muttley, who were from they did have their own cartoon. It was a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. They were involved in the Wacky Races. I think Dastardly and Muttley were on the Wacky Races. At any rate, this particular book has a total of 12 copies on the Census from KK Publishing. We've talked about this from time to time. They did a lot of these insert comics or giveaway comics, especially the shoe stores. This is issue number 292 with the Three Stooges. Got a photo cover, 10 copies on the Census, and it is smaller sized as well. From EC, wow, we're down on the list. This is Mad number 124, and this made me chuckle a little bit. This is a cover takeoff on the 1968 film Rosemary's Baby, with Alfred E. Newman as the baby, and Mia Farrow as the mother, and John Cassavetes as the father. That just made me chuckle. I've never seen the movie. Late 60s blind spot for me. But I will get to it at some point. 9 copies in the Census. And the top book from Fawcett is Dennis the Menace and Margaret, number 1. A number 1 from Fawcett. The Fawcett's still publishing Dennis the Menace. I think it was their only comic book at the time. 8 copies in the Census. So there we go. That's the 1969 list. Again, a lot of underground books that are there. They're having an influence on the comic industry. They're not really influencing the major publishers yet. That probably won't happen until the 1980s. But we're going to start to see that transition from underground to independent, where the independent books were, they might have had a little bit of more risque material, but not always as, as counterculture. We'd have it from 1969 as the undergrounds. And really a slow year for Marvel and DC, to be honest. Not a lot of books that collectors get really excited about. But I think 1970 will change that. Let's see what happens when we get to 1970. I'd like to thank you for stopping by and taking a look for this video. Give us a like if you like this video. It helps the algorithm, and I know people enjoy seeing this when they do stumble across it. In the meantime, you can take a look at a couple of my other videos.